Park stood at the window of the command center and watched the stars. The cold light of distant suns fell on his tired face. He was 53 years old, and his hair had turned gray at the temples. Deep lines marked his forehead and the corners of his eyes. These were not lines of laughter. These were lines carved by years of hard work and harder losses. Behind him, the sounds of Tagu Station filled the air. Children laughed somewhere in the lower levels. Machines hummed as they processed the ore that the miners pulled from the frozen ground of the moon below. Voices called out in Korean, English, Chinese, and a dozen other languages. 4,000 people lived on this station. They were miners and engineers, teachers and doctors, mothers and fathers. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives on the edge of known space. Turned from the window when he heard footsteps. His wife walked toward him with 2 cups of tea. She was 49 years old, with kind eyes and silver streaks in her black hair. She smiled at him the way she had smiled at him for 25 years of marriage. "You look worried," she said, handing him a cup. "I am always worried," he replied. "It is my job to worry." "Your job is to keep us safe, and you do." She touched his arm gently. "Come home soon, is cooking dinner tonight." Their daughter was 22 years old and had her mother's smile. She worked as a medical assistant in the station hospital, loved her more than he loved his own life. He loved both of them more than anything in the universe. "I will come home," he promised. Kissed his cheek and left. Watched her go, feeling the warmth of her touch fade slowly from his skin. He did not know that this was the last time he would ever see her. The alarm came 2 hours later. It started as a soft beeping on the long-range sensors. Lieutenant No, a young woman with sharp eyes, was the first to notice. She frowned at her screen and ran the scan again. Then her face went pale. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking. "We have contacts, multiple contacts. They are coming out of fold space." Moved to her station and looked at the display. His blood turned cold. 12 ships hung in the void. They were black as the space around them, shaped like curved blades, and they bent the light in strange ways that hurt the eyes. Had seen pictures of such ships in military briefings. He had hoped he would never see them in person. Warships. They were an old race. They had ruled their empire for 11,000 years, long before humans learned to make fire. They controlled 100 star systems and 1,000 worlds. To them, humans were insects, small, weak, and unimportant. They allowed humanity to exist in 3 small systems, far from anything valuable. It was not kindness. It was indifference. Humans were simply not worth the effort of destroying. Until now. "Send a distress signal," ordered. "All frequencies. Contact Earth Command, contact Mars, contact anyone who can hear us." "Sir, they are jamming our communications," reported. Her hands shook over the controls. "Nothing is getting through." Grabbed the station-wide intercom. "All personnel, this is Commander Park. We are under attack. Move to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The first shot hit the station 3 seconds later. The impact threw across the room. He struck the wall hard and tasted blood in his mouth. The lights flickered and died. Emergency red lighting kicked in, painting everything the color of blood. He pulled himself up and looked through the cracked window. The ships were firing in perfect formation. Blue-white beams of energy cut through the station's shields like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed in the darkness. Pieces of the station broke away and tumbled into space. The screaming started then. It came through every speaker, every communicator, every open channel. 4,000 voices crying out in fear and pain. Heard mothers calling for children. He heard men begging for help. He heard the sounds of metal tearing and air escaping and fire consuming everything it touched. He tried to reach on his personal communicator. Static. He tried again and again, his fingers stabbing at the buttons until they bled. Nothing. "Commander," someone shouted. Hands grabbed him and pulled him toward an escape pod. He fought against them. My wife, my daughter, I have to find them. Sir, the habitation ring is gone. The voice belonged to Sergeant, a big man with a face. Tears ran down his cheeks. It's gone, sir. There's nothing left. Stopped fighting. He looked through the window and saw that was right. The habitation ring, the section of the station where the families lived, where and had their small apartment, where they had eaten breakfast together just that morning, was no longer there. In its place was twisted metal and floating debris and bodies drifting in the cold vacuum of space. Something broke inside then, something important, something that would never heal. Pushed him into the escape pod. Other survivors crowded in around them, counted them automatically, 12 people in a pod designed for 8. Their faces were bloody and burned. Some of them were crying. Some of them were silent. One woman held a child who was not moving. The pod launched. Through the small window, watched Tagu Station die. The ships continued firing long after there was any reason to fire. They were not just destroying the station. They were erasing it, making sure that nothing remained, making sure that no one would ever forget what happened to insects who lived where they were not wanted. The attack lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 4,000 people were dead. 47 survived. A cargo freighter called the Bright Moon found them 6 hours later. The freighter's captain, a grizzled old man named Han, pulled the survivors from their pods and gave them food and blankets and a place to sleep. He asked no questions. He had seen the wreckage on his sensors. He knew what had happened. There was nothing to say. Sat alone in a corner of the cargo hold. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He held his teacup in his hands. He had grabbed it without thinking as the world fell apart around him. It was cold now. It would always be cold. News of the attack spread across human space within days. There was shock. There was outrage. There were angry speeches and tearful memorials. The United Nations sent a formal protest to the hegemony, demanding an explanation. The response came 3 days later. It was one sentence long. The infestation at 442B has been cleared. No further action is required. That was all. No apology. No justification. No acknowledgement that 4,000 human beings had lived and loved and dreamed on that station before they turned them to ash. To the ancient empire, it was nothing. Less than nothing. A minor cleaning task completed by a minor functionary. Read the response in the refugee camp on Mars. He read it once, twice, 3 times. He memorized every word. Then he put down and raised his head. His eyes were dry. His hands were steady. The thing that had broken inside him on Tagu Station had reformed into something else, something harder, something colder, something that would burn until it had nothing left to burn. He did not know what he would do. He did not know how he would do it, but he knew, with a certainty that went deeper than bone, that he would make them remember. Humanity was not an infestation. And Park was not finished. 6 months passed like slow poison. Park lived in Camp 17 on Mars. It was not really living. He woke up. He ate when someone put food in front of him. He slept when his body could no longer stay awake. He stared at the red dust outside his window and thought about nothing. Thinking about nothing was easier than thinking about everything. The camp held 3,000 refugees from various attacks. They lived in gray metal buildings that were too cold in the night and too hot in the day. They stood in lines for food. They filled out forms for relocation. They waited for a future that felt more like a slow death. Around the camp, around Mars, around all of human space, people were angry. Heard their anger through the thin walls of his room. Protests filled the streets of every major city. People burned flags and demanded action. Politicians made speeches full of brave words and empty promises. The United Nations passed resolutions condemning the attack on Tagu Station. They ignored all of it. They did not respond to protests. They did not acknowledge resolutions. They simply sent a message to all human governments: stay in your designated systems. Do not expand. Do not resist. If you obey, you may continue to exist. If you disobey, you will be removed. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual certainty of a farmer explaining rules to his livestock. Stopped leaving his room. He stopped eating unless forced. He lost weight until his clothes hung loose on his body. He kept his teacup on the small table beside his bed. Sometimes he talked to it. Sometimes he apologized to it. Sometimes he just held it and felt the coldness of the metal against his palms. The camp doctors said he was suffering from severe depression and survivor's guilt. They gave him pills that he did not take. They suggested therapy that he did not attend. They wrote reports about him that he did not read. On the 203rd day, someone knocked on his door. Did not answer, he rarely answered. People usually went away. This person did not go away. The knocking continued. It became louder. Then it stopped and the door opened anyway. A woman walked in. She was short and compact, with muscles that showed through her military uniform. Her hair was cut very close to her head. Her eyes were dark and sharp and looked like they had seen terrible things and refused to look away. "Park," she said. It was not a question. "Who are you?" His voice was rough from lack of use. "Captain, United Earth Defense Force, retired." She looked around his small room with an expression that was not pity, it was recognition. "You have been here for 6 months. You have not applied for relocation. You have not contacted family. You have not done anything except sit here and wait to die. What do you want?" "I want to know if you are going to die, or if you are going to do something else." Laughed. It was an ugly sound like metal scraping against metal. "What else is there to do? Fight they have 10,000 warships. We have nothing. They have ruled the galaxy for 11,000 years. We have existed for 300. There is nothing to do except wait for them to finish what they started." Pulled a chair from the corner and sat down facing him. She did not ask permission. She moved like someone who had stopped asking for permission long ago. "I lost my ship at the Battle of Station," she said. 200 crew. I knew all their names. I knew their families. I watched them die because I gave an order to hold position when I should have ordered retreat." She paused. "I spent 1 year in a room like this one. Then I decided that dying was too easy. Dying meant they won. Dying meant their deaths meant nothing." "What did you do instead?" "I started building something." She leaned forward. "Not an army. We cannot build an army that can defeat but we can build something else. A network, a movement. People who are willing to fight not because they can win, but because fighting is the only choice they can live with." "That is suicide." "Maybe, or maybe it is something they have not seen in 3,000 years. Real resistance. Not protests and resolutions. Not angry words and empty gestures. Real resistance from people who have lost everything and have nothing left to fear." She stood up and walked to the door. Then she stopped and looked back at him. "I have a ship. It is old and small and should have been scrapped years ago, but it flies. I have a crew of 23 people. Each of them has a story like yours. Each of them decided that waiting to die was not acceptable." She pulled a data chip from her pocket and placed it on his table. "The coordinates are on this chip. If you decide that dying is not acceptable to you either, come find us." She left. Stared at the chip for 3 days. He held his cup and thought about what she would say. She had always been the brave one. She had always been the one who pushed him to do more, to be more, to never give up even when giving up seemed like the only option. On the 4th day, he picked up the chip. The coordinates led to an abandoned mining platform in the asteroid belt. The ship waiting there was called named after the flower of Korea. It was ugly and patched and looked like it might fall apart at any moment, but it was real. It was something. Met him at the airlock. Behind her stood her crew. They were men and women of different ages and different backgrounds. Some wore military uniforms. Some wore civilian clothes. All of them had the same look in their eyes. the look of people who had been to the bottom of despair and climbed back out carrying something dangerous. She introduced them one by one. Lieutenant was a pilot. He was 31 years old with quick hands and quicker reflexes. He had flown fighters in the defense of New Sol Colony. His entire squadron had died covering civilian transports. He was the only one who survived. He had not forgiven himself for surviving. Dr. Shin was She was 45 years old, with gray streaks in her hair and a calm voice that hid deep wounds. She had spent her career studying alien life forms. The had declared her research illegal and sent troops to her laboratory. They executed her team for the crime of learning too much about the galaxy. Sergeant First Class O was a soldier. He was 38 years old and built like a mountain. His arms were covered in scars. He did not talk about his past. He did not talk about his family. He did not talk much at all. But when he looked at ships on something cold and terrible moved behind his eyes. There were others, engineers who had watched their stations burn, medics who had held dying friends, teachers who had seen their students killed for asking questions. Each one had a story. Each one had a reason to be here. Gathered them all in the main hold of the I am not promising victory, she said. I am not promising survival. I am not promising anything except this, the chance to fight, the chance to show that humans are not livestock, the chance to make them remember that the universe is not their property and we are not their possessions. She looked at each face in turn. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who has nothing left to lose. They have ruled so long that they think ruling is their right. They are wrong, and we are going to teach them just how wrong they are. Felt something stir in his chest. It was small and weak, like a candle flame in a dark room, but it was there. After 6 months of nothing, something was there. He thought of the 4,000 people who had died on Tagu Station because an ancient empire decided they were pests. He raised his hand. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had found exactly what they were looking for. "Everything," she said. "I need you to do everything." And so the gathering of the broken began. They became a ghost. It moved through the dark spaces between stars, hiding in asteroid fields and gas clouds and the shadows of dead moons. It never stayed in one place for more than a few days. It never traveled the same route twice. It existed in the cracks of the galaxy, in the places where they did not bother to look because nothing important had ever been found there. Park spent his days studying. He read everything he could find about their history, their culture, their military tactics, their victories and their failures. He read until his eyes burned and his head ached. Then he read more. What he found surprised him. They had not fought a real war in 3,000 years. Oh, they had crushed rebellions and destroyed uprisings. They had wiped out species that refused to obey. But these were not wars. These were exterminations. They never faced an enemy who could hurt them back. They never developed new tactics because they never needed new tactics. They simply arrived with overwhelming force and crushed everything in their path. Their military doctrine had not changed in 30 centuries. They used the same formations, the same strategies, the same approaches that they had used when humanity was still learning to farm wheat. Why would they change? Nothing had ever forced them to change. Saw something in this, a weakness hidden inside their strength. They were powerful, yes, but they were also rigid, predictable, complacent. They had forgotten how to adapt because they had never needed to adapt. He started writing. He called it the Doctrine of Sorrow. It was a tactical manual based on human history, not the glorious parts of human history, the victories and triumphs that children learned about in school, the dark parts, the desperate parts, the times when small groups of people had faced impossible odds and found ways to survive anyway. He studied guerrilla warfare, how small bands of fighters had frustrated great empires throughout human history, The tactics were always the same: strike fast, strike hard, disappear before the enemy can respond. Never fight on their terms. Never give them a target they can destroy. Make them chase shadows until they exhaust themselves. He studied psychological operations, how fear could be a weapon more powerful than any bomb, how uncertainty could paralyze an enemy who was used to certainty, how symbols and messages could inspire friends and terrify enemies. He studied the mathematics of resistance. How much did it cost to garrison a planet, to guard a supply line, to protect every possible target in an empire of 100-star systems? The numbers were enormous. If humanity could become expensive enough, painful enough, annoying enough, they might decide that crushing them cost more than ignoring them. "We cannot defeat them," told the crew one evening standing before a map of space. "Not in battle. Their ships are faster, their weapons are stronger, their numbers are greater. If we try to fight them directly, we will lose." "Then what do we do?" asked the pilot. "We do not fight them directly. We fight them indirectly. We bleed them. We exhaust them. We make them spend 10 credits to counter every 1 credit of damage we do. We make their empire a burden instead of an asset." He pointed to the map. "Here, a supply depot on the edge of their territory. It services warships patrolling this entire sector. If we destroy it, those ships will have to travel 4 times as far to refuel. Every patrol will cost 4 times as much. Every response will take 4 times as long." "There will be guards," said the soldier. "Minimal. It is a supply depot, not a fortress. They do not expect anyone to attack their supply depots. No one has attacked a military target in 800 years." The crew exchanged glances. What was proposing was insane. It was suicide. It was exactly the kind of desperate, reckless, impossible thing that no reasonable person would ever attempt. They voted unanimously to try it. The attack happened 3 weeks later. They approached the depot using a route that had calculated to avoid all sensor networks. They came in silent running, engines cold, drifting like just another piece of space debris. The guards never saw them coming. Flew like a demon. He threaded the ship through gaps that seemed impossible, dodging automated defenses and patrol craft with moves that made everyone's stomach lurch. Led a boarding team that cut through the depot's security systems in 9 minutes flat. Identified the critical targets: fuel storage, communication arrays, computer cores. They planted charges and retreated. They was halfway to the safety of a nearby asteroid field when the depot exploded behind them. A flower of white light bloomed in the darkness. Months of supplies, gone in an instant. Before they jumped to safety, broadcast a single message on all frequencies. 2. It was an old Korean phrase. It meant again or once more. It was what you said when you refused to give up, when you stood back up after being knocked down, when you faced impossible odds and chose to fight anyway. 2. We will do this again, and again, and again, until you understand that we will never stop. The message spread across human space within days. People who had given up hope felt something stir in their chests. The phrase appeared on walls and signs and clothing. Protesters began chanting it at rallies. Soldiers whispered it to each other in the barracks of human military bases. They noticed. They sent investigators to the destroyed depot. They found no evidence of who had attacked. The explosives were human-made, yes, but untraceable. The attack vector was impossible to reconstruct. The humans had come from nowhere and vanished into nowhere, leaving only destruction and 2 words behind. 2. The second attack came a month later, a communications relay that connected 3 systems. The third attack was 2 weeks after that. A regional governor's personal yacht ambushed while traveling between planets. Each time the same message. Each time the same impossible precision. Each time they responded with rage and confusion and found nothing but ghosts. There was no longer alone. Word had spread through the hidden networks of human refugees and dissidents. Other ships appeared, other crews, other people who had lost everything and found something to fight for. Trained them all. He shared the doctrine of sorrow with anyone who would listen. He taught them how to strike without being seen, how to vanish without being traced, how to turn this own strength against them. Every target we destroy costs them resources to rebuild, he told a gathering of resistance fighters on a hidden base. Every system we disrupt costs them resources to repair. Every time they send warships to hunt us, those warships are not guarding something else. We are a tiny needle and they are a giant balloon. We cannot pop the balloon, but we can make it leak air, one tiny hole at a time. They responded as expected. They increased patrols. They reinforced depots. They sent more warships to hunt the human terrorists. But the galaxy was vast, and humans had learned to hide in its vastness. For every cell they destroyed, two more appeared somewhere else. Stood on the bridge of the, and watched a patrol pass harmlessly by, completely unaware that the ship they were hunting was drifting silent and dark just a few thousand kilometers away. He thought of the way they had dismissed their deaths as clearing an infestation. He whispered to himself. This was just the beginning. They responded with fire. Colony ships carrying families to new settlements were intercepted and destroyed. Small farming communities on distant moons were burned to ash. The message was clear and brutal. For every drop of blood that humans spilled, humans would pay with rivers of their own. The attacks were random and merciless. A school on Europa, a hospital ship near Saturn, a refugee camp on a world that had nothing to do with the resistance. They did not care about guilt or innocence. They cared about terror. They wanted humans to understand that resistance led to death, not just for fighters but for everyone. Watched the reports come in. Each one was a weight on his chest. Each one was a voice asking if this was his fault, if the people dying now were dying because of what he had started. He sat alone in his quarters staring at his teacup. The metal was dull now, worn by months of his fingers running over its surface. He wondered what she would say. He wondered if she would be proud of what he was doing or horrified by its cost. Captain found him there. You are blaming yourself, she said. It was not a question. How can I not? Every death is not on you, not on us. She sat down across from him. Do you think they would stop killing humans if we surrendered? They murdered 4,000 people on Tagu Station before any resistance existed. They killed those people for being in the wrong place, for existing where they were not wanted. But now they are killing more. They were always going to kill more. The only question was whether we would die on our knees or on our feet. She leaned forward. I know this is hard. I know you see every death as your responsibility, but the responsibility belongs to the ones pulling the trigger, not the ones refusing to be targets. Closed his eyes. He knew she was right. He knew it in his head, making his heart believe it was harder. But something strange was happening across human space, something they did not expect. Instead of breaking, humanity was hardening. The attacks that were meant to terrify people into submission had the opposite effect. Parents who lost children did not retreat into silence. They joined the resistance. Workers who saw their friends killed did not beg for peace. They sabotaged equipment. Soldiers who were ordered to stand down and accept alien authority began to whisper to each other about other options. The phrase, too, spread like fire through dry grass. It appeared everywhere, scratched into walls, painted on buildings, tattooed on skin. It became a greeting, a promise, a prayer. When humans met each other in the refugee camps and the hidden bases and the secret meetings, they did not shake hands. They raised their palms and said the words. We rise again. Admiral was 64 years old and had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 40 years. He was the highest-ranking human officer in any military branch. He had spent his entire career counseling patience and diplomacy. He had written papers arguing that humans must accept their place in the galactic order. He had given speeches telling people that accommodation was wisdom, not weakness. Then he watched a video. The video was from a patrol ship. It had been captured by Resistance hackers and distributed across human networks. The video showed soldiers walking through a human settlement. They were shooting people, not soldiers, not Resistance fighters, ordinary people, farmers, shopkeepers, a woman holding a baby. One officer looked directly at the camera. He was tall and elegant, with silver skin and eyes like polished gems. He smiled as he gave an order. Soldiers grabbed a group of children. The oldest was maybe 10 years old. The children were wearing shirts with the words "to" printed on them. The officer said something in his own language. Then the soldiers executed the children, one by one, while the officer watched with mild interest. Admiral watched the video 3 times. His hands shook. His vision blurred with tears. When the video ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he made a call. The call reached through 17 layers of encryption on a frequency that officially did not exist. When she answered, she saw a face she knew from news feeds and official broadcasts. A face that had always represented the cautious, careful approach that the Resistance rejected. "Captain," the Admiral said, "I believe you and I should talk." The meeting happened in person, on a dead moon where no ships ever patrolled. Stood beside as the Admiral's shuttle landed. He did not know what to expect. He did not know if this was a trap or an opportunity. Admiral walked toward them alone. He was a thin man with white hair and a face carved by decades of difficult decisions. He stopped in front of and looked at her for a long moment. "You were right," he said. "I was wrong. I thought we could survive through submission. I thought if we were quiet and obedient they would leave us alone." His voice cracked. "I was a fool." "What changed your mind?" asked. "Children." The word came out like a broken thing. They executed children for wearing shirts, for words on fabric, for having hope. He raised his head. "What do you need from me?" The answer was everything. Ships began to disappear from the official fleet. Not stolen, reassigned to long-range patrol duties that existed only on paper. Weapons and supplies vanished from military warehouses, replaced by carefully records. Officers who had quietly sympathized with the Resistance found themselves transferred to positions where they could do more good. The Resistance grew from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands. They were not an army. They could not fight in open battle, but they were everywhere. Every system had cells. Every station had sympathizers. Every corner of human space became a potential ambush, a possible threat, a place where certainty could turn to blood. Planned the most ambitious operation yet. Not an attack on a supply depot or a communications relay. An attack on the itself. Not a military strike, something more dangerous. A message. The team was small. 12 people in a ship designed to look like a cargo vessel. They had stolen codes and forged credentials and months of careful preparation. They slipped through the defenses of the most heavily guarded world in the galaxy. They landed on a continent that had not seen violence in 5,000 years. They did not fire a single shot. Instead, they hijacked the planet's broadcast system. For 11 minutes, every screen on the showed a human face. Speaking words that were translated into every language in the Empire. "You taught us that we were nothing. You taught us that we were insects, to be crushed whenever it pleased you. You taught us that resistance was impossible and hope was foolish, and our lives had no value." He paused. Behind him, the Resistance logo glowed, a human figure with raised hands. "You were wrong. We are not insects. We are not nothing. We are human beings, and we do not kneel." He looked directly into the camera. "We are not alone in our suffering. Your empire rests on the backs of 100 species you have conquered, 100 peoples you have enslaved, 100 worlds you have stripped of hope. We say to them now, If humans can fight, so can you. If humans can resist, so can you. If humans can refuse to die quietly, so can you. He raised his hands, palms up, empty and defiant. 2. We rise again, and we invite you to rise with us. The broadcast ended. The team escaped barely, with warships burning the sky behind them. 3 of the 12 did not make it home. But the message could not be recalled. It had been seen by billions. Not just, but the other species who lived under their rule. Species who had been conquered so long ago that they had forgotten resistance was possible. Within a month, 17 of those species had begun their own uprisings. The galaxy was on fire, and humans had lit the match. The High Council met in their ancient chamber on their ancient world. They sat in floating chairs of polished crystal, surrounded by walls that had witnessed 11,000 years of rule. Their silver faces showed confusion and something they had not felt in centuries: fear. Their empire was burning. What had started as a minor annoyance, a few human terrorists attacking supply depots, had become a wildfire that spread across 100 systems. The humans had inspired others. Species that had been obedient were now rising up. Trade routes were disrupted. Military resources were stretched thin. Governors were being assassinated in their own palaces. The council debated for 3 days. When they emerged, they had reached a decision. They would offer humans a choice. The message was broadcast across all human space. It came from the High Council itself, the first direct communication from leadership to humanity in over a century. The hegemony recognizes the difficulty of recent events. In the interest of peace and stability, we offer the following terms. Humanity will be granted full sovereign status, equal to any citizen race of the hegemony. Human worlds will govern themselves. Human ships will travel freely. Humans will be treated with the respect due to any civilized species. There was a pause. In exchange, the terrorist organization known as the Resistance will disband immediately. Its leaders will surrender themselves to authorities for reconciliation tribunals. This is not punishment. It is justice. The criminals who have caused so much suffering must answer for their crimes. Another pause. The voice grew colder. This offer will remain open for 30 standard days. If it is not accepted, the full military force of the hegemony will be committed to the complete eradication of the human species. This is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. Choose wisely. The message ended. Humanity erupted in debate. Some said the offer was everything they had ever wanted: sovereign status, equality, respect. All they had to do was sacrifice a few thousand resistance fighters. Was that not worth it? Was peace not worth any price? Others said the offer was a trap. They would never treat humans as equals. They would wait until the resistance was destroyed, then return to their old ways. The reconciliation tribunals would be executions. The sovereign status would be a cage with prettier bars. The United Nations scheduled an emergency session. Representatives from every human world gathered to debate the future of their species. The arguments went on for days. Tempers flared. Alliances formed and broke and formed again. Park watched it all from the bridge of the... He was 60 years old now. His hair was completely gray. New scars marked his face and hands. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night in years. Stimulants kept him going when his body wanted to stop. Memories of and kept him going when his soul wanted to stop. Stood beside him. She looked as tired as he felt. The years of running and fighting and watching friends die had carved deep lines into her face, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had sparked the resistance all those years ago. "They want you to address the UN," she said. "I know. Will you do it?" Looked at the stars outside the viewport. Somewhere out there they were preparing their fleet. Somewhere out there, millions of humans were hopping for salvation. Somewhere out there, The ghosts of Tagu Station were waiting to see what he would do. Yes, he said, I will do it. The quantum link was established. His face appeared on a screen 30 feet high in the UN chamber. Thousands of representatives looked up at him. Millions of viewers across human space watched from their homes and ships and stations. He took a deep breath. I am not a diplomat. I am not a politician. I am not a leader. I am a man who watched his wife and daughter die 7 years ago. I am a man who decided that their deaths would not be meaningless. That is all I am. That is all any of us in the resistance are. People who refuse to accept that our lives had no value. He paused. The chamber was silent. They have offered us equality. They have offered us respect. They have offered us everything we ever wanted. All we have to do is give up the people who fought for us, the people who bled for us, the people who died for us. His voice hardened. I am here to tell you that their offer is meaningless. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. It is meaningless because we have already won. Not the war. The war may never end. But we have won something more important than any war. We have won our dignity. We have won our self-respect. We have proven that humans are not what they said we were. He leaned forward. 7 years ago, they called us an infestation. They killed 4,000 people on Tagu Station and called it pest control. They expected us to accept it. They expected us to bow our heads and return to our designated systems and wait quietly for the next time they decided to clean up their galaxy. His voice rose. We did not accept it. We rose up. We fought back. Not because we thought we could win, but because submission was worse than death. Because we are human beings and human beings do not kneel. He raised his hands, palms up, empty, defiant. This is what we are. This is what we have always been. Every time we have been knocked down throughout our history, we have gotten back up. Every time we have been told that resistance was impossible, we have resisted anyway. Every time we have been given a choice between freedom and safety, we have chosen freedom. Tears ran down his face. He did not wipe them away. They offer us survival if we accept chains. I say that survival without dignity is not survival at all. I say that a cage with golden bars is still a cage. I say that any peace built on betrayal and submission will last only until our new masters decide we are not worth keeping. He lowered his hands. So here is my answer to the High Council. Here is my answer to anyone who thinks that humans can be broken by force or bought by promises. Here is my answer on behalf of everyone who has died for the dream of a humanity that stands on its own feet. He spoke the words slowly and clearly. Again, always, forever, whatever you do to us, we will rise. Whatever you take from us, we will rebuild. Whatever you destroy, we will remember. This is not a threat. This is not a negotiation. This is simply what we are. The chamber exploded. Representatives shouted and argued and waved their hands. But when the vote came, it was unanimous. Every nation, every colony, every station. Humanity rejected the offer with one voice. The war continued. It lasted another 40 years. They threw everything they had at humanity. Fleets were destroyed. Worlds were burned. Millions died on both sides. But humans kept fighting. And the other species they had inspired kept fighting. And slowly, inch by inch, the great hegemony began to crumble. Did not live to see the end. He died at 71, in a hospital bed on a world that humanity had won through blood and sacrifice. Was there, holding his hand. Was there, standing guard even though there was no longer anything to guard against. And dozens of others who had survived the long war were there, filling the room and spilling into the hallway. His last words were quiet, had to lean close to hear them. Tell them we got up again. 500 years later, the phrase was humanity's motto. It was inscribed on starships and carved into monuments. It was taught to children before they learned their own names. It was the first thing humans said when they met alien species, and the last thing they said when they said goodbye. In the ruins of the capital, now a memorial to the billions who had died under their rule, there was a statue of a man. He was not young, he was not handsome, he was not a warrior or a hero from old stories. He was just a man, ordinary and tired and by loss. But his hands were raised, his palms were up, his face was turned toward the stars. The plaque at the base of the statue said, Park, Commander Tagu Station, 27 942865. He got up again. And every year on the anniversary of the day Tagu Station fell, people came from across the galaxy to stand before that statue. They came in millions, humans and aliens, old and young, rich and poor. They stood in silence as the sun set behind the ruined towers of the ancient enemy. Then as one they raised their hands. Two, again always forever. They got up again.